From Florida's capital, this is Power Play.
The state of Florida formally apologizes for slavery. U.S. Senator Bill Nelson wants to overhaul national elections, and at halftime of the 2008 session of the Florida legislature, we'll go to the press box to see who's winning and who's losing with our guests on Power Play this week, Catherine Dolinsky of the Tampa Tribune and Rick Flagg, Bureau Chief of the Florida News Network. Welcome. Let's go right into this apology. 140-some years after the Civil War ends, the Florida legislature apologizes for slavery. What's behind that?
A historic moment. You've got to admit that. Very few states have apologized. And a lot of people have questioned the wisdom. What's the point all these years later? Well, there's a big point. Saying sorry is important. Apologizing for past misdeeds matters to people. And I think it's rather astounding to see legislative leaders, it suddenly dawned on them that this was important to a large segment of society. And I think they're to be commended for what they did, especially the Senate President, Ken Pruitt. He was the driving force behind it.
Although in terms of the question of what does it matter, it does always raise the question of reparations, which I understand Governor Charlie Crist mentioned but sort of backpedaled away from yesterday. Whenever states apologize, the question is, how sorry are you? Are you going to actually pay African Americans for what their ancestors went through? And right now it looks like the answer is no.
Right. In Florida we're sorry, but not that sorry.
And I do think the governor said this is not the year to talk about that, but he did raise the issue. Very interesting. U.S. Senator Bill Nelson comes to the Capitol this week and unveils some election reforms at the national level. Prime among them, doing away with the Electoral College, which many Americans probably don't understand. What do you think about that?
Well, this proposal has been around for years. I mean, ever since the 60s, people have been saying it's an outmoded system. It needs to be replaced. And I'm sure they were saying it before then. We just weren't around. But the Electoral College system, there was a purpose for it. There was a reason. It gives the small states some comfort that they won't be run over by the big states. And remember, the U.S. Senate is all divided by number of states, not population. So the small states have a majority in the Senate. Senator Nelson's idea may be good, but as long as the Senate's controlled by the small states, it's never going to fly.
And there is the question of whether or not the Congress has the authority to regulate primaries, and if they do, if they're willing to, both parties are willing to wade into that mire.
For any of these big changes, particularly the Electoral College, constitutional amendment needed national level. What's the likelihood of something like that getting traction?
Well, when's the last time a constitutional amendment was approved? I mean, you have to get 2/3 in both chambers. That then has to go to the legislatures of all 50 states, where it takes, 3/4 to be approved? I don't think we're going to see any sort of constitutional amendment passed in this country anytime soon.
Okay, it's halftime in the 2008 session of the Florida legislature. Pretty good time to take a look at who's winning, who's losing, who's flexing a lot of muscle, and who's got none. And who are the big winners or losers emerging from this budget process?
Well, the list of losers is long, and you'll struggle to find a list of winners in the process. This week, it really came into stark reality when the healthcare budgets came out. We're talking no more, some of the cuts being discussed, no more hospice for dying Medicaid patients, no more dentures for poor elderly on Medicaid, transplant and cancer patients in the medically needy program not being able to get hospital care, or maybe not being able to get care at all. They're not going to be able to plug the budget hole. It was made very clear by just cutting the fat and reducing redundancies.
Is the pain being fairly distributed in these cuts, Rick?
Oh, absolutely not, because every company that has a special interest tax exemption, they get to skate free. Those are the big winners in this process. Everyone who has their little niche of the budget, their little tax exemption carved out, and that includes the broadcasters. I mean, let's be fair about this. They all benefit. Everyone else is getting cut, but the people who have their tax breaks keep their tax breaks.
Our program's called Power Play. Let's talk about who's wielding a lot of power in this session and winning their way with it.
Well, we definitely saw some power yesterday being flexed by, some muscle being flexed by the Senate President. He's thrown the latest punch in the fight between lawmakers and the Board of Governors over who has the right to set tuition for Florida's colleges and universities. He's got, his big priority is this constitutional amendment that would gut the Board of Governors and would ask voters in November to unequivocally say it's the legislature that sets tuition, and that just flew through the Senate yesterday.
I think you also have to give credit to Marco Rubio, the House Speaker. Normally in the last year of your speakership, it's more ceremonial. The power has already passed to the next speaker. But Speaker Rubio did some actual work at the Tax and Budget Reform Commission. He turned around some votes there. He really put the hammer down. And I think he's determined not to go out on a low note. He's actually making a difference.
Very quickly, anybody emerging from the back rows as a strong leader who didn't seem to be one before the session began?
Well, I think somewhere down on the I-4 corridor right now, there's a couple that's about to have a kid, and that will be the speaker in 2025. That fetus is probably collecting signatures right now to run for speaker in that year. Everything is done so far in advance now.
All right, Catherine Dolinsky, Rick Flagg, thank you very much. Go to the Safety Review for the latest political news, and we'll see you next time on Power Play.